first things to act on the agenda.
I move to accept it as written.
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Act on the minutes from September 9th.
I move to accept the minutes as written.
I second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And public comment? None? So an old business, the municipal energy resilience grant discussion.
So I started the application for that this week, and with a lot of help from Martha from the Regional Planning Commission. Basically what she did was she went through the energy audits that we had done on each building, and which helped prioritize what we want to put in the application. And she must have had I'm not sure what she had, but she had something to put dollar figures to everything. So we're in process. That is due, I think it's due by the end of the week, and we'll hear in the next couple of months. And obviously some of the bigger things are trying to reduce reliance on fossil fuels. So looking at replacing all of our oil boilers with other things. The recommendation for here in the town hall would be either some kind of a pellet boiler or heat pumps. In my opinion, a pellet boiler here and at the town hall isn't practical, so heat pumps make more sense. So that would be something in the application. The town garage, because of the size, they were saying either a pellet boiler or electric radiant heat, which would be much more expensive. So we'll probably say a pellet boiler. The logistics of such a thing, I guess we would have to see what all that would involve, because obviously no one lives in the building to keep, even if you get a big hopper. But Charlie said like trucks come, I guess, and you can get it filled up and all of that. But still, I don't know how much maintenance is involved with maintaining the heat for that, or if they're not saying they won't take out our existing oil-fired boilers and things. They'll be there, especially when it's cold, as everyone knows. Heat pumps don't do the trick when it's, below zero. So the oil would still supplement that, just looking to reduce that use. I'm not clear how much our electric bill would increase with using other things. But we looked at different ways of keeping our application to $500,000. She talked about, well, let's take out the window replacements. And I said, well, there's no point in having a new source of heat if we don't get the windows. They're all single pane windows in every single building. Makes more sense to me to leave the windows in and look to, maybe we don't have to upgrade the electric panel, and maybe we don't, spend as much on some of the ADA recommendations, because we can use up to 20% of that grant for ADA upgrades that were part of the other grant, and we need to implement some of them at least for this grant with money from this grant. So we're just kind of working through that application process, and we'll go from there. It'd be great if we get it. How or where we source contractors and things like that to even do any of that remains to be seen.
Sure.
One step at a time, though.
Right.
Yep.
And
Let's see what we get.
Will we be, if, like, in the decision-making process, will we be able to compare the exact expense that we've been having with fossil fuel as opposed to, say, pellets, like in the...
Yes, and
'Cause I don't have a
actually that
sense
was
of what
part
it
of
was.
that was something I had to do before we got our energy
see.
audit. I had to go through 3 years of electric bills for each of the buildings and break that all down by month for each year. So the folks who did the energy audit looked at that, and they projected some savings for various things. And I can email those reports again if you would like me too. It's a little bit to wade through.
It might be
I think they're about.
premature,
Let's
but
wait and
I
see,
would
but it's
think,
nice to look at.
I mean, you'll
before
want
we
to
actually
see just to
decide,
see what
yeah.
we're aiming
Yeah.
toward, but
Yeah.
and it would be one thing. They're about 35 pages each, so there's a lot of stuff.
I would wait, but if
But you could get an overall sense of.
Yeah.
I agree with the heat pumps in this building and the town hall, because they could be utilized as air conditioning also.
Right, and that would be more efficient.
Yeah.
For
And
sure.
and obviously not the same idea for the garage. That wouldn't be efficient at all. It'd take a lot of heat pumps
Right.
to do that garage. And
Exactly.
they wouldn't utilize the air conditioning side of it at all.
Right.
And you couldn't put radiant heat in. You'd have to tear the whole place down,
Yeah,
put in the
that's
floor.
that. I would say the only
So the
option
only
is
option
the pellet
is
boiler
pellet.
type
Yeah,
thing.
that's what it sounded like. And
Yeah.
I'd have to look, I didn't look through the details to understand what they were recommending for better insulating that building. They did talk about attic space or the upstairs space. I still wonder how effective any of that is with those big doors opening and closing as much as they have to in the wintertime. I don't know. And whether you can't, there's not much you can do to mitigate that, I don't think. But I would have to look through the report a little bit more to see if they addressed that at all.
Yeah.
So that's where we are with that. Lighting is one of the things that was in there as well. Obviously, that's less of a priority. It's more addressing HVAC and if envelope, HVAC and envelope.
Yeah.
This upstairs in the attic, they stuck their heads upstairs and went, there's vermiculite up here, no, which is bad stuff. And they recommended that it all be sucked out and put a different kind of insulation up there. So again, we'll see what money's available to do what, but even if we could do some of those things, even if we started to get a couple of windows replaced in here, since there are so many of them, one building at a time and
Right.
one project at a time, and maybe, I don't know what it looks like. I think the grant, I don't know if it's done by building or if they give you an overall amount with something assigned for each building. Maybe you are able to get a person or a company to replace the windows, and you do everything all at once. So I'll keep you posted.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to Lovejoy Brook Farm.
So the only thing I had was Chris Walker had talked about the hose across the road. I just asked Chris and Charlie about it in the last few days, and Charlie said, I don't know if he asked them to move it or if it just got moved and it isn't there. I don't know. The other concern that was expressed sort of just informally in passing was there seemed to be at least 2 campers on the property with people living in them. Don't know if that's okay. Are we talking like a zoning thing at this point? Like how many people and how many structures can you have living on a property without some kind of zoning permit at least, like accessory dwelling units or, and I'm not sure what, for example, like Horseshoe Acres has to have that sort of setup. But
But we don't really have limits, like zoning limits on having some different people living on.
You can only have so many dwelling units on a parcel before you have to subdivide.
But they
Certainly.
might not be individual units, they might be just they might just be overflow bedrooms. I mean, we don't know.
But they are if they're separate from the house. Then that
But
would
we
be
don't know
right.
if they're actually separate from the house, they're just a separate.
Well, they wouldn't be attached to the house.
Well, they're campers.
They're campers. I think there is something about having campers inhabited in the town, but that would be something we'd have to ask the zoning.
Yeah, that would be a zoning
You know,
question
that's
for
a whole
sure.
zoning
So
thing.
those are the only things. So I'm not sure what other concerns, and obviously people
Can't imagine
didn't-
somebody's gonna live in a camper in the winter.
Well, that's the thing. It might have been just a summer setup.
But nobody's complained about that specifically in the sense that.
I would say express concern with, well, how many are going to end up here and how many people is that, and just sort of, it was more in passing than a complaint, I guess I would say.
Because like, even if I owned a house, I could live in a camper if I wanted to, couldn't I, on my property?
I would think so. But there's a limit on how many dwelling units you can have on one
Per
parcel.
2 acres.
Right.
I think
That's
it's
what it is.
per
So if
2
you remember
point
back to
something
Mark
acres.
Carey, he immediately said, I want a house and I'm going to have 3
Yeah.
Airbnb cabins. And the zoning board said, well, no, you'd have to subdivide. You can't have that many dwelling units on one parcel. But if you had 2 parcels and you put 2 cabins here and 2 over here, that meets the zoning regulations.
I'll follow up with Charlie about the garden hose, see if he asked or if it just, and if it shows back up.
Right.
ask this time to not have it there.
To not have it, right?
Which is the same idea. Winter's coming. It's not feasible to be there.
It won't
anyways,
be there,
'cause
right?
It'll just freeze. So
Well, and making sure that the right of way are clear where they're supposed to be, so that, you know, when, not
Yeah.
the first time it snows, we aren't struggling with things being too close and them having to navigate
Does
around.
any of this ever get brought up to the zoning board? As far as,
Well, road right of way,
no, not the road
is-
right away, but just in general, what's this?
not that I'm aware of, not in a long time.
I think it's just a roundabout. It goes from one to back and forth, because
I think the zoning administrator was asked once about permitting in terms of, well, at what point is it considered a junkyard? Because they're selling stuff. And he said, well, I don't see a sign that says things are for sale, so he wasn't sure.
the winter sand follow-up.
So I think everybody saw my email that
It's great.
David, well, particularly Samantha, she's like, no, I don't want your money before we come and get the stuff. That messes up my books. I said, hey, I'm with you.
Yeah.
And David was fine with that because he was trying to figure out, he was going to need to figure out, because that would be a large influx of cash all of a sudden and have to figure out his accounting and
right,
all of that. And I said, well, no, we don't have to pay you right now. That's okay with us.
right.
So it all worked
That
out
works
just
out great.
fine.
Yeah, that's
And they would just prefer to bill us load by load, and they're happy to stockpile it there until needed.
Yeah.
And we
That's
did
great.
get a little more of this year's winter sand. I saw 4 more loads from Hunter the other day.
Yeah, Hunter. Sorry.
I guess it's coming in fits and spurts because they're doing it for other places and they're only making, I don't know, they're doing what they can do, I guess. So it's not coming in one fell swoop and being all done. It's going to be a little at a time. Hopefully, though, they'll get to a point where we get all that we want before the snow flies. I would think we would want it all before the
Yeah.
snow flies. And maybe I haven't received an invoice yet, so they might be waiting until they're finished before they invoice us.
And they said David Shave said he would hold on to 2 years worth of sand.
He did.
That's really good.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
It is.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Bake him some cookies.
Yeah, right. He wouldn't take my money, so yeah, cookies, I guess, are the next best thing.
Yeah, so the road commissioners report, I just talked to them like last week, but they were the same thing. They got the roller. They're going around grading, rolling, and putting down chloride because it's so dry on certain spots.
Do we use flake chloride or do we use
Liquid.
It's
liquid? Is it liquid?
Yeah, comes in a
And-
tanker truck and goes
Yeah.
in the tank at the top of the.
And I haven't
sand pile.
seen an update heard an update on the truck, so that must mean there's no update.
Right.
So, and
No news is not good
yeah,
news.
that's well,
Not in that case. All right. It's on its way. All right.
the financial orders.
As far as road stuff, up to while we're there, I guess FEMA flood stuff in with that. Still meeting with Hector on a weekly basis. A week before last, he had Jim Tonkovich join us, who works for the state of Vermont, and we were at kind of a big holdup with Lovejoy Brook Road and Davis Road because of the way the engineer Scott Jensen wrote the stream alteration and emergency work permits. It made it very clear that there was additional work to be done. So for some reason it got held up, and our liaison Hector said, well, I know what to do, but it's above my pay grade. I have to have someone tell me that it's okay to do what I know needs to be done, which is to separate out the work so that it's emergency measures that were done at the time, and we fixed everything because we had to, but now there's further mitigation work to be done, and so it needs to be somehow separated. So he's working on that. So fortunately, Jim was able to make a phone call we already, I mean, we knew about Davis Road, unfortunately, because of that new grant that's available, that box culvert that needs to go in there could very well fall under that grant program, which would be great because anything FEMA can offer for a mitigation grant is going to be so tiny, it's going to be a drop in the bucket for the price of a box culvert. I mean, if you guys weren't on the board yet for the North Hill box culvert, they're $250,000 easily. And that was 4 years ago. So,
and there was a big difference in bids on that one job, if I remember right.
yeah. So, we'll be pursuing the Vermont Emergency Management Grant for that. And then I'm not sure what they'll do with Lovejoy Brook Road. They might call it, it needed to be done at the time in emergency measures, but realistically, if I'm understanding correctly, there are 3 culverts in a row on Lovejoy Brook Road, and each one of them needed work. And for some reason, the middle one, it looks like the stream alteration permit or whatever it was said, well, this needs to be upsized. Well, you don't upsize the middle of 3 culverts.
Oh.
It doesn't make any sense. The rest of them didn't say they needed to be upsized, so you wouldn't go back and dig up the road and upsize that one culvert. So we're in a gray area with that one at the moment. The unfortunate part of that is it has put a stop to the entire reimbursement process for that, and that's a $200,000 project that happened.
Wow.
So, all I keep saying to Jim is, I'm like, but Jim, we spent $200,000 to fix the road. Can we figure out what we need to do with this if we need to go? But why can't we get back the money that we spent? The work is done, long done. You've all been here. I don't understand why that stops the reimbursement process. If you want us to do something else, great. If you want us to do something else, but so you're going to withhold the entire amount of money because.
And this is all because of that middle culvert being.
It's my understanding
that it was.
And it wasn't Charlie's understanding that it needed to be upsized. He said they were all replaced with what was already there that hold water just fine unless there's an event like this where the water goes where it went, like this.
Right.
We've had other water events that didn't damage those culverts. It was just the circumstances and the way water headed down that hill.
So can we get someone to come in and take another look at that proposal that it needs to be up?
Well, I think
or is it
Jim is talking to people, and I don't know if he's reached out to Scott Jensen, the engineer, yet. Charlie talked to Scott after the fact, so I'm not sure what they need us to do that will be the proper thing to do.
Can they re-engineer it? Maybe put barriers? I don't know. I'm thinking.
Some different ditching or something rather than tearing out the culvert.
Or tearing out the other ones.
Yeah. So, I'm not sure what will happen.
I mean, I suppose they could tear out the one below and upsize it, but that seems, if we don't need, if Charlie didn't feel like we needed to do that, why would we do that?
So I'm not sure what will happen. So we'll keep meeting each week and figuring it out. And right now we're doing I put in for reimbursement for material there's a group of like 5 roads that are the last 5 roads that we have, and the initial measurements done by V-Trans in a spreadsheet that Hector goes by to calculate how much material should have been put back. Well, as Charlie says, every one of these roads we put more material back than we lost because first you lost the stuff off the top that you can't measure. Then you lost the stuff underneath, which is the holes that we actually measured. So of course you put back, and on top of that, a lot of the contractors laid in a lot more stuff to give us a better road surface in case and for the next time. And so yes, of course we used more material than you might see on a spreadsheet as having fallen off that road or floated away. So we just have to look and, talk about some of the ditching that was done, and that'll justify the amount of materials. So we should have that done this week, and hopefully that'll help Hector push that project through the system. So we're down to just those few. We just got $30,000 last week for Pettingill, Simmons, and Newton roads. This group of roads with the materials will be the last 5, and then we still are hung up with Davis and Lovejoy. And that's it. So, the list gets shorter.
And it's been a dry summer.
Yes, thank goodness. For us anyway.
So, financial orders.
I think they're right there.
Thank you, Jeanette.
Yes.
As always, that's so much work.
The minutes are not
Oh, they are?
in there. No.
Oh, I thought I printed them.
We can't do this red. Is this our first NIMRIC payment?
No, that's the third
Is it
one.
the third? Thank you.
She's printing off the minutes.
Yeah. Are your farmers markets winding down?
Yeah, you know, they wind down just as what's available gets really great.
Yeah.
You know, everything's just like purple and bright red and orange and there's so much of it, but yeah, it's all.
Are there correspondence?
There is not.
Well, there we have it. You're our guy.
Anybody?
Aren't you the one that, or am I? Oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I second it.
All those in favor?
I-